all the esteemed panelists, Mr. Hari, Ms. Ghazal, and Ms. Mayura for this discussion. Thank you so much for accepting our invite and coming down to discuss around CSR funds, CSR projects, and the role that CSR can potentially play for us. It's very important to understand the role of CSR foundations and CSR funds in terms of enabling the impact innovation. And this forum is one of the most excited forums that I've been looking forward to discussing with all the esteemed panelists in terms of how foundations are currently working, how are we driving impact across various underserved markets and being able to enable that, right? So a quick intro around Head Start. So to all the members who are joining in as well. So Head Start is an ecosystem enabler working for the last 15 years, enabling these startups across various regions. We have grown up to have chapters across 30 plus cities in India, and have two international chapters as well in Berlin and Finland. And we continue to work with a lot of ecosystem enablers, a lot of partners like governments, incubators, accelerators, corporates, investors, to provide the right support to the startups. Right, startup is a difficult journey. It's in many cases a lonesome journey, and a community support has played a very big role in enabling the right type of support that startups can take and grow from. And we believe in the value of pay it forward, where we have been lucky enough to be able to enable a lot of startups in the ecosystem, and now they are also very actively working with the Head Start Foundation to create better support to the upcoming next generation of entrepreneurs. Today's sessions is focused around CSR. So what exactly is CSR? CSR is it's a corporate social responsibility mandated by government to ensure that as corporates can continue to grow, they also give back value to the sectors which are underserved, and ensure that as a community that we are growing well, right? So be it organizations who have net worth of 500 crore plus, have either a revenue of 1,000 crores or a profit of 5 crores. We have around 2% of the profits which are actually being earmarked for the supporting social responsibility, supporting activities which are really helping us create a better value in the underserved market. Very recently in 2019, the government of India actually expanded the role of CSR, where they also opened up CSR funds to incubators and academic institutions with the focus around helping bring innovation to the forefront, helping conduct research in science, engineering, technology, medicines, and also promoting the sustainable development goals. Now that as a rule has really helped make way for enabling a lot of support towards innovations. While we have a lot of foundations working at the grassroots levels, really helping on improving factors like education, skill development, human empowerment, and also increasing the reducing the gap that we currently see between the underserved and the overserved market itself. There's also a very strong need of promoting ventures who are very impact focused. And we believe that with this new addition in the policy, that will also enable more long-term prospects in terms of how do we build better solutions that can help us scale scale some of the key problems that we are seeing in this underserved market itself. And with that, one of the key areas that we are right now looking at has been the incubators focus area. And as Head Start, we have been really working very closely with a lot of incubators in the region, enabling them to provide better support in the ecosystem. We believe that our goal of impacting, supporting 100,000 startups in the country in the next 10 years can really be done successfully when we are enabling these partners. And at the same time, we also see a very continued focus from the government as well to play, to have the incubators play a very important role in enabling this ecosystem, where 10,000, like where we have, for example, institutes like AICTE, mandating all the colleges to have an incubator in the campus, where we have programs like AIM, Niti Aayog, or DST, funding incubators to start their activities, be it, a small scale funding to small operations to, getting a more world-class incubators itself. Where the very recent startup fund scheme was also to enable startups through incubators. And as foundations, as we look at, this is also an area of bringing innovation in the sectors that we are very focused on. We see different partnership or different avenues where a foundation can support incubator in either building infrastructure and facilities. They can support in, doing programs and partnerships with incubators for startups or, challenges, and as well as technology itself, right? Where we have a lot of foundations supporting startups by providing, material or financial resources to help them build their solution and get them ready to go into market. Now, while this is a wide variety of support that can be given, the panel was, the panel that we have over here with Ms. Ghazal Raina from Ford India. We have Mr. Hari Narayan from Manipal Group of Manipal Foundation, as well as Ms. Mayura Balasubramaniam from Captain Foundation, right? Folks who have been in the ecosystem for far too long, they have a good understanding of both how the foundations also work, and have also experienced working with startups and the ecosystem. And for us, this panel is all about, trying to understand various foundations, trying to, go deeper into how foundations really work, and how could foundations, work towards bringing this innovation to the forefront itself. So thank you all the esteemed panelists for joining us for this session. So we'll start with Ms. Ghazal. Ms. Ghazal Raina is from Ford India company. She drives various CSR activities in the company, from setting up priorities to, identifying partners, engaging employees for volunteering activities as well, and also, completing all the compliance that are required as part of the CSR process. With, more than 20 years experience in the sector of CSR and education, Ms. Ghazal actually started her career itself as an entrepreneur, launching the nursery school for village students, and thereby, going up to then leading school development programs for the Teacher Foundation, working with school heads at the grassroots level and enabling them for effective teaching. Right, after spending almost like 10 years in the in the education space, Ms. Ghazal then actually transitioned to the corporate side, where she has been very actively working on various CSR roles to enable better support in the ecosystem, from working with iGate to Capgemini and now at Ford India. She continues doing what she loves the most, right? Helping the underserved people with a bigger team, a greater power, and a huge impact in the ecosystem itself. In her personal capacity, Ms. Ghazal also champions co-parenting in the families, going through divorce and separation. She's founder of many support groups, the latest one being MILAP, a group that helps non-custodial parents and promotes advocacy for co-parenting. Right. So thank you, Ms. Ghazal, for joining us over here. It's great to have you in this session.
Thank you, Taha, and thank you for the introduction and this wonderful platform that you've created to have this discussion. Not very often do you have this topic coming up where you're bringing incubators, innovation, and CSR and foundations together. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Ghazal, for coming in. To start with, let's talk about Ford Motor Company, right? So Ford's commitment to India is not just about from a business perspective. At the heart of the company's business, is their focus towards people and communities, with the unwavering commitment that Ford has towards the people in the country. A lot of the Ford's CSR initiatives are a reflection of that. To go further journey in India itself. We would love to start with understanding some of the key insights on the CSR policy for Ford Company. What are the sectors that is a focus area? How do you go about deciding and working on those areas?
Right. Absolutely rightly said. So Ford and philanthropy are not new, right? So we are a 118-year-old company. So philanthropy and social good comes as part of the legacy that we have inherited over the years. But of course, in India specifically, in the last 25 years that Ford has been here, we have been very actively engaged in finding out what is it that we can do for the communities around us. And one of our missions that we've very strongly taken up is the awareness and advocacy that we can create within our employees as well as the communities around. So there is a very strong spotlight on that need for changing our mindsets and bringing about change, which doesn't always have to be something that you can see tangibly, but a larger change in attitudes, mindsets, especially around driving and the environment that we focus on. I would say, if I have to sum it up, I would say that Ford believes that there has to be a sustainable model of change. And long before the new, the amendments and the changes came up, Ford was looking at projects where we would be engaging every possible stakeholder. We would have probably the focus would not be on just creating new facilities, but how do we maintain that change? So for example, in the toilets that we create, if I have to give with an, explain with an example, we focus probably 20% of the money or the effort on actually building the toilet. But 80% of focus is actually making sure the toilet remains how it has been constructed. So whether it's a child who's using it or the school who's maintaining it, or probably, helping the school with the scavenger support, we make sure that there is a need for change and the facility continues to be what it is. So I think that's one of the examples that I want to give. And in all the focus area that Ford is currently supporting in India, which is around the places that we are in, which is Chennai in Tamil Nadu, Chennai and Coimbatore in Tamil Nadu, and Gujarat in Sanand in Gujarat. We have been focusing a lot on finding out what is the need of the community, which we actually are serving, I would say, which deserves our help, the state that we are in. And how is it that Ford can be a change agent? By bringing in the right agencies, which are NGO partners, which could be multiple agencies, like probably even for-profit agencies. And of course, our employees and the government together in this whole change enabling sort of project that we want to bring in. So that's where we are. And we support education, environment, women's empowerment, health and safety, and something which we call humanitarian, which is a mix of a lot of organizations and causes which usually would not get support from other companies. So that's what Ford is currently doing in India.
No, thank you so much, Ghazal. I think very rightly said. Ford being in the ecosystem for the last 180 years and being very well known in the world as a philanthropic initiatives and the driving that they have been doing over there, and also the focus towards need for change. And I think that's also going to be something I want to talk forward as we talk about innovation as a one of the key areas to bring in those changes. But before that, you also talked about the volunteering philosophy in employees. I think that's a very important part of it, right? Ford has a very heavy engagement with their employees in terms of actively engaging in volunteering activities. The Global Caring Month itself that we celebrate, every year we have more than 3,000 employees, Ford India volunteers actually actively engaging with the communities, be it in Chennai, Sanand, Delhi, Gurgaon, and spending more than 10,000 plus man hours in doing community outreach service, right? And I think that actually creates a very big impact and creates that entire feeling of it, right? What are some of the areas that Ford India volunteers love to contribute back to the world? Any thoughts on also these social impact startups that we have? How could we have the Ford India volunteers work with these organizations to bring a more deeper impact in the society?
Right. Thank you for bringing up a topic that's really close to my heart. This is something that I drive personally as well as professionally, very, very actively. I believe that everyone has a purpose apart from just living their life. And that's, I'm very glad to be in an organization which truly endorses this philosophy. So as we speak, the Global Caring Month is on in Ford. The month of September is the time when across Ford, across the world, people participate in social community events. Of course, this is a time when everybody's, there is a lot to do, right? Apart from the other times in the year, but this is a time when everybody is actually looking forward to events. Now, I will also like to add that COVID did change a lot, right? Like in all other aspects of our life, COVID did impact the way people wanted to volunteer. But in the last 2 years, we've actually innovated using technology, using a lot of ideas, and probably also using this time as to brainstorm on what can be done for the community through our volunteers, right? So the traditional way of volunteering, of course, has undergone a huge change, right? It's no longer touch, feel, do, right? It's rather more to do with contribute your skills and time, right? You may not be able to see a tangible change, but you have contributed and made a difference in a lot of other ways. And that's what we did. Interestingly, Ford has a huge number of people, not just volunteers, but business leaders, employees, managers who form an extended CSR team. And it's through these people that we get a huge range of innovation, ideas, campaigns, reach into the organization, right? We really are able to reach down to each and every person. At this point, I think we worked with some really fine organizations who helped us use technology in various ways, not just for connection, not just for making sure that yes, we have a phone access to a child or to a parent or to an Anganwadi worker, but we also created a set of virtual volunteering activities which would be I would say beneficiary ready, right? So while we have the luxury of being having a gadget, a laptop, Wi-Fi, not people in the community don't. So we actually curated a lot of events specifically which would help people in the community at this point of time during COVID and after COVID. So I think that's where we are constantly looking out for, frankly, Taha. We are looking out for ideas and innovation in the field of volunteering. We are looking for projects where you would be able to leverage technology in very different ways for good, right? And it's not just about giving laptops and giving tablets. So in what other way can technology be used? For example, we have the partner whom we are working with has devised a series of webinars for these students who are currently in college on the verge of dropout because the parents' economic conditions have been hit quite severely. And we are looking at doing video mock interviews with them, with our leaders, so they can have first-hand experience from a leader who's put in 25 years, 30 years in the industry and share that information with them. Now, without technology at both ends, this would have been impossible. So I think we're looking constantly for ideas in this sphere. And that's where I'm hoping that I will be able to connect with a lot more organizations who are listening to this.
No, I think that's very very relevant over here, and just also the chat got the same question in terms of how CSRs are directly supporting startups, and of course we'd love to hear from you. But I think one of the things over here could also be just startups who are looking to solve the problems that the foundations are focusing on, like you mentioned, that technology that enables better volunteering, right, or more streamlined volunteering are solution that foundation is looking for. Because from what I understand, and that's the same thing which I also had in my organization, where the focus for the foundation or the CSR was not just about enabling any action, but also bringing that sense of social responsibility in every team member, right? And that's why the volunteering aspect became a cornerstone to the entire philosophy of, hey, which partners are we really working with, where we want to make sure that our employees or our team members are also very passionate to contribute in those areas, and they're actually going and interacting and engaging to build that more deeper self value in terms of giving back to society, right? But Ghazal, would love to understand from you any thoughts from yours on how do we enable CSR foundations working directly with startups?
Right. I think, like I said, the point of start should be where the need lies, right? And coming up with the solution doesn't have to always rest with an NGO, right? It could rest with anybody who has a sustainable solution to provide. Now, in this case, of course, you're looking at is your model scalable? Is your model something that you will be able to get the local administration to buy in for? Is it something that is covered under the Schedule 7? Because yes, frankly, the companies are also following the Schedule 7 mandated areas of work, right? A lot of times companies probably like Ford, who are not foundations themselves, will be mandated to work with a not-for-profit or a trust or an NGO. And that's, I think that is changing, unless of course you're looking at directly working with a large incubator or a startup. If you're not, I think that's also not a very big hurdle, because we do have projects where we have for profits, or we have social entrepreneurs, or we have I would say other vendors working with the NGO partners. So there's a lot of room for collaboration, which I think people are missing out. Everybody looks at directly working with the corporate, but there are I think the network that startups and incubators can form, an alliance that they can form with not-for-profits who are working in a similar area, is something that they need to do. Rather than looking at it as a very competitive style of working, look at it as collaborative, right? Because everybody has their own strength to bring. So one question that I always ask the NGO partners whom we work with is, rather than working with different partners, we would like to have an umbrella of different services provided under one project. So we are always open to the not-for-profit looking for another agency or startup or a for-profit who actually has the expertise, is an SME in that area. So I think that's one tip I would give startups and incubators here.
No, I think that's very, very relevant over here. I think the way the entire community has evolved, and the way now that we are working, I think there's much bigger value in collaboration than trying to be very competitive in terms of, hey, me versus you, right?
Absolutely.
I think the type of technology advancements that are happening and type of niche startups are able to solve by collaborating, I think they create a much bigger value itself than just trying to focus on, hey, let me just get a project for myself and let me do this, right?
Yeah.
Which also brings me to the other point, right? When we think about CSR foundations, the first thought that comes to mind is always about funds, right? But there is a much bigger value that we see. And especially, thinking about the Ford program of driving skills for life as an example over here, right? Where you have been training 10,000 plus people in India since the launch to, special sessions around driving, partnering with corporations, traffic police, defense personnel, Rotary clubs. You have a large network of partners that you are enabling through. Now, as we look at, let's say, trying to bring in more technology innovation and identifying startups who are, let's say, solving this in a more scalable or a more efficient way, we do see a potential where they are actually getting support, not just in terms of a foundation fund, but that could be even secondary. But a much bigger support could be understanding of the root cause problem. What are these partners really facing? What are the challenges that they are having, right? And as a foundation working very closely, you will also have a better view in terms of, hey, what solutions can really work over here. So you're able to even guide, and with these senior teams that we have, who have actually seen products being built and having that experience, and also now because of their passion, looking at a problem, can evaluate that and then guide let's say of the 10 solutions who have applied, identify like the top 2 which may work, give them that palette. The funds can be a secondary part to enable them to do that delivery better. But I think the mentorship, the understanding of the problem statement, the connections with all these partners to enable that can be a much bigger aspect, right? And would love to hear your thoughts, on such programs, on how do you see, such programs actually creating value and helping us bring that innovation to the forefront.
Right. Thank you so much. Another area which I hold very close to my heart is the road safety program. And I think I would like to use that example to talk about this aspect of work. About 2.5 years back, a few companies, all of us who are in Sholinganallur, Chennai here, every city has this hotbed of really crazy jammed areas of traffic, right? I mean, Bangalore has many more. Chennai also has, despite being on OMR, the IT companies also bear the brunt of that huge onslaught of traffic by starting their days. So what we began was an initiative where we said that there are initiatives where companies adopt schools, lakes, ponds, even villages, but who adopts a road? Can we adopt a road? right? Because that's the start to everybody's morning, right? And you start by probably, really bringing the worst explicits to your mind, or losing your cool, or getting delayed for your meetings. So that really ruins everybody's day. And that thought actually brought us in Ford to get reach out to a couple of companies around us, our neighbors, and say that why don't we all look at adopting a road. And with that thought, what we did was we worked with the police department and got a few of us to take charge of making changes on the road, which would help to reduce the bottleneck. I would not say remove. Remove is impossible right now unless we have a long-term plan on it. And we were able to do that after a lot of challenges, but there was success to a large extent. A major part of it was also reaching out to other organizations and agencies and then the corporates to get ideas on what would be innovative solutions on reducing the bottlenecks, the traffic jams, the accidents on the road. And that's where we came in contact with a lot of other organizations. That group of forum actually scaled up, and we had almost about 9 to 10 large corporates around the OMR, which came together to form the Road Safety Council. And we worked very closely with the police on ensuring that, one, there was a lot of need for understanding pedestrian safety, pedestrian behavior. There was every company beautifully took up one day of the week where their employees would volunteer on the roads. Ford did something called as Ford Fridays, and every Friday you would see Ford employees on the Sholinganallur junction actually helping people to navigate the traffic, motivating people who were following the rules. But what I wanted to bring up in this is, in this whole collaboration, there is a lot of room for innovative ideas on road safety that we were looking for. While we continue to work on advocacy, getting employees involved, getting the police to give us adequate help and coverage, I think we did not see many ideas coming up. We did work a lot with the IIT and Professor Venki there on understanding, because they are doing immense and amazing work on road safety through THAI. And they're also propagating a lot of ideas across the country, which have been appreciated and awarded. So we are looking for organizations which can bring out innovative ideas on how to really solve the traffic jam situation, which every city undergoes. So that's I think one area of work where startups and incubators can come together. And I mean, of course, COVID came and lessened the traffic, lessened the accidents naturally, but we are looking at going back and restarting this. So if there are organizations who have ideas, we have already built an ecosystem, as well as got a lot of goodwill from the agencies and the government on bringing in a lot of new changes. And of course, when corporates come together and CSR companies are there, funding, of course, becomes part of something that people can expect.
I think that's like, bang on to what, we had in mind as well, where, there is a need, there is also a deeper understanding, and there's also clarity, from the team in terms of, hey, what is looking for, right? But the gap in terms of being able to identify such solutions exists. And I think that's an opportunity where, we see our ecosystem partners to come in, where, their primary role is to be able to identify, solutions which are scalable, and then being able to guide them, mentor them, and build them. I think this is where a very fruitful partnership, let's say with the Road Safety Council itself can be done, and with one of our partners where, we do a program, invite applications from across India for innovative startups in the road safety space, hear them out, see which one works, and then, end up with the winners actually getting a project, right? Because for us, like for a venture, that is the biggest win, right? Being able to implement their solution and bring it into market is one of the biggest challenges. And I think that's the perfect harmony where, foundations working together with academics and incubators to enable that can create value over here. I know we are going to be off time. If you have 2 more minutes, I would just want to last question over here, if that's fine, Listen.
Sure.
So I think, lastly, in terms of partners, because, that's one area that you have actually spent a lot of time in. You have worked with 50 plus partners, and you see a lot of engagements happening. Very important, how do you onboard a partner and how do you measure impact?
Okay. 2 very large questions. I'll try and take that in a very short while. How do we onboard partners? Through a lot of ways. One is we, of course, ask for project proposals from the largest universe of project partners that we have. We reach out via our LinkedIn and our social media platforms, existing partners. We roll out a request for, proposal plan to other partners. A lot of times our employees are the ones who also suggest partners to us. So that's a very big channel of getting new ideas and getting new NGO sort of information for us. The third is that we reach out to our existing NGO partners and we look for in what ways can they collaborate on getting somebody who already has a solution for the problem that probably all of us are facing, all of us meaning Ford and the partner themselves. So we also rely on them. The second question that you raised was, how do we measure impact? I think it's like an ongoing process, because defining the word impact itself takes quite a while. Making people get onboarded onto the same idea that this is the impact that we need to make also takes a while. But I think what we've been able to do over a period of time is look at very specific measurable objectives that we want to achieve, right? So rather than looking at very broad, long-fetched ideas of change that we want to look at, we break it down into every year. What are some of the objectives we want to achieve? In 2 years, what is the path that we want to create and where do we want to reach? And eventually in 3 to 4 years, that's the maximum that Ford will take a project on. Where is it? What is it that we can change in the community? And what are the changes that we can actually see with, like I said, with all these stakeholders? So we have certain deliverables, or we have certain criteria that we ask the partners to keep measuring. And of course, the new amendment also makes it mandatory to take impact assessment. So we have already built that up through adding a third-party impact evaluation with our partners, which needs to be done every once in 2 years. And like I said, that we have a lot of our business leaders, employees who take part in becoming the extended arms and legs of the CSR team. So they are the ones who help us in the monitoring and evaluation. So there are a lot of brains and arms and hands who are working on these projects.
Thank you so much, Ghazal. I think this has been really helpful for us. And I think, I truly believe that, any activity, unless measured, we don't really get to know the impact of it, right? And like you said, these impacts, again, very long-term, but, being able to have that focus, and like you mentioned that, again, mandated by government, but also having, a third-party evaluator ensures that there is more, congruency in terms of how are we looking at impact and planning over there itself. Right? We do have a lot of questions from other panelists, from other attendees as well. But what we'll request is that, I'm going to share these questions with you over an email. If you can respond, we will post all the answers on our LinkedIn page so that, every answer is taken care of. But I know that we have limited time and this is an amazing discussion that can go on for hours also. But thank you so much for coming in, Ghazal, over here. I think this has been a really meaningful conversation for all of us. And, the type of chats that we had in the group, there's a lot of focus and a lot of engagement also from the community in terms of enabling and partnering with CSR foundations itself and CSR programs, right? So we do look at, collaborating more. And I'm sure that we'll be talking more in terms of how can we do things together? How can we enable more such right problems and right solutions from the ecosystem?
Thank you so much, Taha. Thank you for having me here, and really wonderful to share the thoughts, and looking forward to more avenues of working together.
Perfect. Thanks, Ghazal.
Thank you.
All the attendees also for the questions. We have a limited time, but I'll make sure that all the questions that we have are documented and we get them answered and put on a LinkedIn page for you guys to have a look at. So with that, I would love to now invite Mr. Hari to the chat. Mr. Hari is, a seasoned industry expert. He has worked across various industries and verticals, having close expertise in investment, management, corporate strategy, mergers and acquisitions, including diverse investment banking, corporate and structured finance, right? So that's an area that, Mr. Hari comes in a very, very, very deep expertise in. One of the, unique part about Hari has been, his experience first, both driving, growth in domestic and global markets, as part of the Manipal Group, leading the healthcare space for Manipal Group, to then also, managing the own fund. So Hari was the founder and managing director for MEMG CDC Fund, $80 million fund, which was launched 5 years back, focused around innovative startups. And then in his current role right now, Hari also, leads the Manipal Foundation, which is focused on supporting education, healthcare, skill development in the underserved regions. Right? With Mr. Hari comes with a great perspective as a business leader, philanthropist, and also a startup ecosystem enabler. And to talk about enabling of impact ventures, I thought was a perfect person over here with this diverse background, very closely working with the startups, and now also wearing the foundation's hat and looking at impact ventures. We believe that there's going to be a lot more value that we can get in this discussion itself over here. So thank you, Mr. Hari, for joining us.
Thank you, Taha, for inviting me to participate. I'm very happy with the discussion that happened with Mrs. Ghazal, because a lot of thoughts were coinciding. So it's actually going to be very simple for me to handle all the questions that you're going to throw, because it gives me a great confidence that, we are all thinking alike.
No, agreed. So I think, and we also had a previous conversation as well, where we look at, the role of foundations is, now a lot more, it's more horizontal in terms of the impact, and not just, as a way of, fulfilling the government's requirement. And I think that's also a very important thought in terms of enabling as an ecosystem what we're looking over here, right? To start with, I think first thing would love to hear more from you around the focus areas for Manipal Foundation. How are you supporting community at large?
Sure. See, for us, actually, supporting the community has been part of the DNA right from its inception. As many of you may know, we were a group which was set up about 70 years back in a small village in the Udupi district by the founder. And his primary motive was to contribute towards human development. And in that context, they had identified 3 pillars. One is education, the other is healthcare, and the other is how do you improve savings in the community. So these were the 3 foundations based on which the group was formed. And much before the word CSR was coined, the group has been doing its primary business from a responsibility towards the community approach. So for us, doing charity work is a one form of contributing to society. I think there is more than just contribution. It's the way we empower students, the way we empower people with better health, especially women and girl children. I think that's the way we have approached the foundation as an activity, more towards contributing to society. However, when the regulation, and so each and every entity that we had in the group had its own mode of reaching out. So way back in 50s, the medical school adopted public health centers to where students and residents used to go to man them. And that resulted in improving the health indices of those centers much beyond the WHO standards. So adopting the community became a part of our DNA. Similarly, in healthcare, we of course participate in various programs where sponsors come and want to support the underprivileged. So this has been the way we have grown till in 2002, I think around that time, when we said there are multiple entities doing different things, why not channelize everything into one platform? And that's how Manipal Foundation was created as an entity by Dr. Anjan, the 3rd generation founder of the group. So with that, what we have done is essentially to put together all our education and healthcare and other charitable efforts under one umbrella, and trying to see how we can get A, resources, B, how do we identify projects which can be taken up for implementation. One thing we were very clear, and that's very similar to what Ghazal mentioned, we are not there to execute every project ourselves. The only way we knew that we will succeed is if we were to participate and collaborate with people who understand that specific domain. So that's been the philosophy with which this foundation was started. We started identifying people who have deep-rooted presence in geographies and use them as our partners for implementation. And that is what we believe is a sustainable model. And we believe whatever we have done today, we do virtual education for about 200 schools and about 20,000 children in the state of Karnataka, of course. We are trying to see how we can replicate this in larger markets. And obviously, it needs to be customized to the local syllabus, local curriculum, local needs, but our objective is to see how do we reach out to more. So that's our vision for the next 2 to 3 years. How do we do 2x, not from a value perspective, but more from a reach perspective?
I think that is actually, very, very, relevant and important. And especially, education has been one of the biggest talking points in the COVID environment, where, we have seen kids, move from classrooms to laptops and devices. And also, like what Ms. Ghazal mentioned, that at the rural India, the challenge was not just about the device, about the delivery itself. And I think that's where the virtual classroom learning program that the Manipal Foundation has been running for the last 7 years, has become very useful. I'm sure that this has been a time where, the importance of the virtual class would not have been, in any way, amplified upon. But also it opens up the doors for new innovation, right? Yeah. Where, now we see, I'm sure that with the type of impact that we have seen, the importance of the VCLP also enhancing in this time, but also opportunities in terms of now how can we go more deeper. So would love to hear, some of your thoughts on, what are the challenges firstly that you had in the last 2 years in moving from every school to every household and enabling this, the learning method. And then also, a follow-up question to that one is, what are the long-term impacts, especially for rural education?
Sure. So, one is, unlike the privileged children of the cities and towns, we were addressing the needs of the rural and the semi-urban children who go to government schools. And whether we did it by design or by default, it's difficult, judgment will say. But when we started this program, we did it in a virtual mode way back. And the virtual with a hybrid twist to it. So we used to adopt one school in a cluster of 10, made it into the studio school. So the teachers used to go there and teach from a studio where we had the gadgets there. And from there, it used to be beamed to a cluster of 10 schools which are in the vicinity. So what happened was, at one point of time, we were able to cater to about 10 schools practically, each school with about 60 to 70 children for one section, for one subject. So 600 schools, 600 children were able to be benefited at one shot through this model. And what we did then, so that model continued. And we were also very clear, we didn't want to go to the conventional full classroom model, that is to take KG to 10. We said, where is the need is in the 9th and the 10th standard for supplementary education. Not the main curriculum, but how to help them to prepare for better exams, to acquire the subject knowledge in a more deeper and a personalized manner. Because the city's children are able to get private tuitions, but the government school children unfortunately can't. So therefore, we said we adopted a tutorial model where the syllabus was mapped for the 9th and 10th standard children, 1 hour in the morning, 1 hour in the evening. And that enabled the child to do better. And the results were in the form of second class students becoming first class becoming distinction. So, I mean, your question of, how do you measure? Of course, the performance is the biggest measure, but there are other measurements of enrollment, etc., which also becomes into play. So while we did that and COVID came, we were also in a, uncertain situation, which way is going to unfold. So during the COVID time, we created close to about 1,000 hours of content in Kannada and English medium, and which we said we'll make it available on YouTube by limited access. So what happened then is during that period, we were able to use our partners to create this content, which is now available as a reference library. With that, we were very happy that at least we have created the content, but still uncertain with regard to when will schools reopen. And in around January, we restarted the program where we said, can we enable the child with a device at home to access the same content? So a different classroom emerged, where the classroom was in his hand and where the child was able to get the same quality of content and be able to deliver or prepare for the exams. The exams were not held as a separate question, but the fact is that they were then enabled through their own personal devices. Now, this is the model that seems to be growing well, and the fact that the state government of, the district government of Udupi, in the month of April, they called us and said, can we expand this to 300 schools, which is within their reach. So from 100, we are now close to 200. From 10,000 students, we are about 20,000 students. So this model seems to be, though it happened by design, by chance, seems to be now in a replicable model. And ties in with what I told you earlier about our vision to say, can we replicate this in larger geographies? In terms of challenges, of course, connectivity is a challenge, device availability. Many families, there are 3 or 4 children. So every child does not have devices at home. So those are issues which we will need to grapple with as we go forward. Hopefully, with schools reopening, we will have some hybrid model emerging. But at this moment of time, this is working well. Enrollments have improved. Number of visits by children to these platforms have improved. So that's proof of the pudding that this works. So that's where we are focused on at this moment of time.
I think that's great to know. So one question that we have from the audience itself, right? So there are a lot of incubators which are encouraging and supporting innovative startups. Especially building for rural India, elder care, education, more impact-driven element of that, right? What would be the best engagement model between foundations and these innovators/incubators?
I think we need to put the cart before the horse. We first need, and as very aligned to what Ghazal was saying, there has to be a very clear identification of need. From my experience, what I see is people have solutions which they have developed using the know-how that they have on the technology side. But whether it is actually applicable at a grassroots level and does it impact or create change, I think we need to get into that stage very, very deeply right at the beginning. So as need assessment at a grassroots level is the first milestone that we need to build. And that's a role which the foundation or the local charitable arm or whatever you want to call it can play a leading role. There is a big participant in this exercise, which is the colleges and the universities which are in those geographies. If the foundation, along with these institutes of higher learning, were to collaborate to go down to the rural areas and identify the problems and come out with problem statements, then we would have real definition of what is the problem, rather than retrofitting a technology solution with a problem which may or may not exist. So in my view, that seems to be the right way to go, which is also fundable from CSR contributions because it is to create impact. The solution then, which then becomes available in the form of a brief, can then be put up to various entrepreneurs to say, hey, this is the brief. Like you give an ad agency a brief and say, now come out with a solution. Similarly, you give the brief to the potential people who want to develop technology and say, how do we now do it? And I'll give you an example. In our conventional model, we used to have one screen, one dabba, one computer box, and a whole gadget there, which has to be locked and kept under lock and key. Now, is there a simpler device? Is there a one box which can be done at a cheaper price? The moment we are able to address those sort of solutions, our scalability and reach becomes that much more better. So I think problem definition is very key. And then using the problem definition to then invite technology solutions is possibly the right way to go. And I think that's where a head start sort of a network will be very useful. To say, okay, now we are a place where people can throw up their ideas and bring it to fruition. Let's hold a competition. And then you choose who is the most appropriate guy who can give a comprehensive solution. I think that's the way possibly we should work in a collaborative manner between the various stakeholders.
Agreed. I think also just to add over there, right? One, of course, the idea is to make sure that the right problem statement is defined, right? Which, like you mentioned, could be done through our academic researches. It could also be done through our partner researches, as we work with so many partners. And like you mentioned, also, with the education program that Manipal is doing right now, there would also be a lot of challenges that have been identified as a way of being able to scale up, let's say, to the next 200 schools or institutions. Like, how do I go about it, right? So first, of course, is being able to define that problem statement, right? And like you mentioned, that once we do that in the competition, also then, having these partners being part of the competition, right? Yeah. Where, we look at incubators or the, innovators to require that mentoring and nurturing to build the solution that is relevant. Technology is there. They know the technology part of it, but making sure that the technology is solving that root cause problem, I think that's where also the foundation and the foundation's partners with whom they have very strong relations can also play a very big role. And I think, like you also mentioned, that lastly, the last step would then be being able to implement that solution, right? Because that's also a challenge that we see in the ecosystem, where a technology solution is built, but not really being able to implement that part out.
Correct. Because unfortunately, we try retrofitting it, and that's a challenge. And then, as we discussed earlier, the ability to then raise capital becomes a challenge for the startup and a demotivator, because he thinks he has a good solution, but unfortunately, the solution does not have a buyer. So how do we make this marriage work becomes key.
Agreed. So I think, a short answer to Gautam would be, being able to, streamline on the problem statement as a starting point, to then bring that work with the incubator or the innovators to implement or figure out those solutions itself.
Right.
Mr. Hari, I think, one key aspect, especially with your diverse experience, right, being managing and mentoring early stage disruptive startups as part of MEMG, CDC Venture itself, and then at Manipal Group. And the focus over there was, of course, looking at startups that can grow exponentially. That has a very high value generation possible over there, right? And then we also look at impact ventures, where the focus is a lot more on, may not necessarily look at the monetary value, but look at the impact value, like the metrics, like, how many people are actually using it, how many people are engaging it, how many people are able to drive value out of it, right? How do you differentiate these two currently? And, being a business focus versus the impact focus. And do you see the, more importance of promoting impact focused ventures to help leverage technology to solve for the societal problems itself?
I think the answer to your own question is in the last statement. I think the fact, the moment you say impact and then you say venture funding for creating those impacts, unfortunately, funding has been always construed in the form of equity funding. And whether we call it impact fund or regular fund, the expectation of the investors is a question of degree, variation between time and return expectation. Whereas to really create impact, you will need to have alternate forms of money fundraise, not in the form of equity or equity, quasi-equity sort of instruments, because they will not speak to each other. And impact, pandemic forced us to do things faster. But if this was something which we had to do on our own, it would have taken a long time to incubate this idea and bring it to fruition. So because the time required to create impact, for our own group, let's say we are 70 years in this space. It has taken maybe 30, 40 years to be impactful. So I think the core is we have to find out alternate modes to finance impact creating activities. And CSR funds can only do a limited role in terms of enabling up to the project definition stage and saying this idea is workable. Thereafter, only when the idea becomes marketable or sizable or scalable, can it go or be placed in front of an investor market. So we'll have to make a clear break that this is where the dough is made, this is the cake is now ready, then take it for the distribution. In my view, we'll have to see it in those two buckets to make it more meaningful.
So, Mr. Hari, would it be right to say that, as a foundation, a lot of focus should be on basically understanding the problem, right, that the society needs, and being able to provide that initial trust for new ideas to come into solutions that can be implemented over there, right? And as a foundation, you are enabling that. And once that enablement has happened, post that, as a venture can then pick up, and grow. Right. Based on, leveraging the equity funds. But I think at the same time, then also, the role of foundation becomes very important, right? Because when we look at, in the current scenario right now, where startups are also very keen on raising funds at the idea stage itself. Hey, I have an idea, I want to raise funds. And of course, with founders having that pedigree, having that domain knowledge, are able to do that and able to deliver on it. But that's not been the norm. That's been just the 1% of the people who have been able to do that. right? For the remaining 99%, that's actually where they have to go and build their, deep root cause of, the problem, figuring out the solution, building their prototype, getting to market, and then being able to raise funds. And I think, and that's where it's a very interesting space for foundations to come in, where, we have so many entrepreneurs looking to solve problems, very eager to, build impactful solutions, and the right guidance that can be driven through foundations and incubators, academic institutions, can enable this mind change or that shift. In like also what Ms. Ghazal talked about, volunteering, engagements was all about building that social responsibility, right? I think the same thing foundations can actually drive through by building that social responsibility among entrepreneurs.
Sure. There's one more dimension to that. One is, while you get these people to develop the solutions, once you identify the problem, you also need to identify local partners for implementation. And those local partners have to have 2 or 3 qualities in my view. One is they have to have a deep sense of commitment and passion to that initiative. I mean, when it comes to education, it cannot be anybody who says, I want to do a rural education product. The person who drives our current education, she has been into education for 25, 30 years. So she exactly understands how does the curriculum roll out, what is the government thinking, how do exams happen. So understanding the domain with a deep sense of passion to make a change. And therefore, getting on board such partners is very critical. Then only the solution becomes comprehensive in terms of its output. The second is the local partner also brings in a lot of understanding of the local terrain. What is suitable in, say, Dibrugarh may not be suitable in, say, Udupi. Culturally, we are very different. Terrains are different. Needs are different. So the involvement of a local partner, and which consciously we decide that we will not implement, we will engage a local partner. So if you were to see, this is a form of a public-private partnership. At the end of it, you will see a canvas like that. The government is got the primary motive. They have to be the enabler. But the private enterprise, which is a combination of a CSR fund, which is able to bring in professional management, professional approaches, and a local NGO who understands domain, terrain, etc., and a technology guy who understands how to convert this vision into reality. I think that's the format which will possibly grow on a sustainable basis.
No, I think that's a beautiful way of summarizing this. Talk about collaboration, and I think that's where the strong suit of partners, foundations, and entrepreneurs coming together, learning and working together, and also being aligned on that goal is where we are actually being able to build those sustainable solutions. I think. So thank you so much, Hari. I know we are on time right now, and I have promised you that we'll make sure that we complete the session on time.
Oh, I appreciate that.
But this has been a really, really, great session for all of us to learn over here. And I do also see a lot of more questions coming down from the team in terms of, the more engagements. But, happy to get offline, being able to connect with the right incubators or startups who are looking in this space, and also collaborate with Manipal Foundation to think about, hey, how do we play a much bigger role in creating this societal impact in the country?
Absolutely. My pleasure. And just an open invite to all the participants who are there. If anybody has got ideas of how we can do this better and more efficiently, we'll be more willing to listen and see how we can implement some of these. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Hari. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Mayura. Sorry, I'm not able to stay back for your session. I'll catch up on YouTube later.
We'll surely get those sessions up there.
Thank you.
Hey, Mayura. Hi. Thank you for joining in.
Yeah. Hi, Taha.
So, just a quick introduction about Mayura. So while we had the first 2 panelists, being from the CSR foundations, talking about how as foundations, they are working with startups, we also thought, for this group of folks to understand the other side's perspective as well. And, that's where we have Mayura Balachandran joining us from Craftsman Foundation. Mayura is a social entrepreneur working in the area of craft-based livelihoods for marginalized communities, including unskilled women and persons with disabilities. Mentor for startups, member of several craft-based forums for thought leadership. Mayura has managed India's first large-scale rural tourism initiative with UNDP and Minister of Tourism, created Explore Rural India under the Incredible India brand, which has been very effective in being able to highlight some of the amazing places that we have in our country that we all should be aspiring to go visit and enjoy. Passionate about handmade in India, preservations of Indian archives and culture. Mayura has been running Craftizen for last 8 years, a social venture which has been primarily focused around the crafts-based skill development, and has created livelihoods for underprivileged women, youth, persons with disabilities, as well as traditional artisans. Craftizen is supported by several companies under the CSR program to provide structured capacity building using crafts as a mean of income generation and livelihoods. Along with the focus on craft and tourism, Mayura also has spent like 5+ years in promoting students and entrepreneurship. From leading the startup leadership program at Hyderabad to leading student engagement at ISP, providing a deeper context to building programs, which has been something that she has been doing a lot with Craftizen and really promoting rural entrepreneurship itself. So Mayura, thank you so much for joining us in today's session.
Thank you for that very detailed introduction.
I hope I have not missed anything, and you have been doing a crazy amount of awesome work in the ecosystem, and I want to make sure that those great efforts have been highlighted over here. Let's start with Craftizen, right? That's the core and the most important thing over here. One of the key things that you believe about is you play the role of craft architects, building bridges that connect the craft sector to newer possibilities. The collaborative model that we see with Craftizen is very unique. It partners with several non-profit organizations, with social enterprises, with corporates, and then, of course, with the rural entrepreneurs to be able to enable the craft and to maximize the reach and impact, right? Tell us more about it.
Yeah, so, when I started my development career many years back, I was very fortunate to be able to work with UNDP. You mentioned the National Rural Tourism Project that I was a part of. And I think being part of something large scale, right at, the early start of my development career made me realize the possibilities that existed when the minute you have multiple stakeholders coming together. So we were able to drive, government organizations, for example, the district collector's office, state tourism departments, combine that with obviously our implementing partners on the ground, which were, NGO partners, but we also had panels of experts. So we had architects to ensure that, any infrastructure was done with rural sort of vernacular styles in mind. We had designers to help with the craft groups. We had business plan experts to actually help with business modeling, right? Because crafts needs to be sustainable. Tourism needs to provide sustainable livelihoods. So I just took all of that learning and said, you know what? No one person can tackle, the large problem of social change in this country, right? And there are so many organizations that are already doing good work. So the idea was, the larger thought was, why reinvent the wheel? Why not work with organizations that have the trust of the community, that have been working for many years, but don't have probably, the last mile, which in craft sector means design, marketing, access to funding, things that I felt I could bring on the table, given my, experience and network in the development sector as well as the corporate sector. So that's how the collaborative model was born. The idea was to scale collectively, but also, to support organizations like ours who are doing incredible work, but have a different expertise to us.
No, I agree. I think, collaboration is the new age philosophy where we realize that the potential is huge, no matter what you do, as long as you have the right people, the right partners working with you. Right? And I think that's also one of the unique things which has also played a very key role in the success of Craftizen itself. So now coming to the type of partners and the impact that you have created, right? Having more than 2,000 beneficiaries of the marginalized group through the CSR funds and the livelihood program that you have run, more than 300 traditional artisans that you have, 42 non-profit that you're working with, there's an entire wide group of folks you're engaging on. right? One of the very important aspect for this forum has been around, building such collaborative partnerships. And like, what Ms. Ghazal and Mr. Hari talked about, collaboration with local partners, being able to understand the problem plays a very big role. Now, as a foundation, uh, can you share some insights in terms of how do you go about CSR funds? How do you uh, are able to get such deals established. This is basically one of the most important know-hows that a lot of our incubator partners, startups would love to know about.
Right. So I mean, I have to say that firstly, the CSR regulation or law has been such a boon for the sector because this has brought in very professional funds. It's so much. I mean, it's really it's a lot hassle free. I would say working with corporates. They understand the requirement of giving funds. Timely, right? Of course, based on milestones and deliverables. But it's so much more sort of organized, right? But with that, I think comes a lot of responsibility in terms of how you structure your proposals, right? So one has to be impact driven, absolutely, from word go, right? From the way the project is structured, from the way your baseline is done, your documentation is done, and of course the outcomes that you deliver, right, at the end of it. So gone are the days, I think, when people would say, we will do all of this training, we will do all of this, but at the end, we are not able to take ownership for the impact because that's not in our control, right? So I think with CSR, a lot of focus on there is a lot more focus on impact and outcomes, which of course is also challenging in its own way, but I think it was much needed in the sector, right? So therefore, anybody pitching to CSRs, you have to have a strong impact plan. You need to know what you can commit to in terms of deliverables. For us, we work in livelihoods, so we have to commit to a certain amount of income earning per person, right? Per artisan that we train, because that ultimately is the reason why we are being funded, right? So we need to be able to have a solid plan for that. Secondly, of course, with the company, you need to have a mission alignment, I would say, right? So companies have certain defined focus areas. You need to have a fit with that. Also, there needs to be an alignment in terms of maybe their geography, right? Which areas they want to work in. So these are largely the two things. Third thing would be scale, So companies are reluctant to do very small one-off projects. They're looking to basically work long-term because they again get the fact that impact can't happen overnight. A one-off 3 month, 6 month, even a 1 year engagement may not actually reap long-term benefits, right? So yeah, these are the three things to keep in mind. Be impact-driven, think, at scale. And of course, see that when you do your research, there is an alignment in terms of your focus areas and the companies.
No, I think fair enough. I think those are, be the most important aspect that we think about, right? And I think understanding who are the right partners to get on board, like you mentioned, that alignment is, one of the most crucial steps. Again, impact continues to be the most important thing because that's exactly why the funds are being leveraged for, right? Talking about partnerships, again, those are the critical to success. Collaboration, as we talk about, can only be, possible when there's successful partnership being developed with the right partners in place. And as you work very closely with corporates and with NGOs as well, what type of value have you been able to leverage from these partnerships, right? Could you also share some of the, share an example of a very successful CSR partnership for Craftisan and what actually made it successful from your perspective?
Right. I mean, we've had some wonderful donors over the years. But I can take the example of Accenture. They have been our partners for the last 6 years. And, what I've loved about Accenture is how they have really helped us grow, the scale and scope of the project. Again, from day one, they said we are committed to at least 5 years, as long as you're meeting all the, objectives, milestones, etc. Therefore, from the, even before we started writing our first proposal with them, we knew that if we were selected, we are doing this with, that sort of a 5-year horizon. And therefore, one could really plan a, very worthwhile, well-structured, organized project. We started a project in year 1. We started with, 13 implementing centers and partners. And so we thought at scale, right? And we could only take on such a mammoth task because, the partner also, from their side said, listen, if you deliver, we are going to be with you, right? So therefore, that has been an extremely valuable partnership. Also, we decided to tackle such different challenges. For example, we said, let's look at communities that are most marginalized. So therefore we said, okay, we'll focus on persons with intellectual disability, particularly moderate to severe disability, right? We also said, let's look at women rehabilitated from trafficking, from domestic violence. And then we said, on top of that, let's add in environmental impact as well. So let's not just do craft skilling, let's do craft skilling with upcycling, recycling of discard, So I think this came about together, where we together sat and said, okay, these are the 3 main objectives, right? So it's not just a livelihood impact, it's livelihood for marginalized. It's not just craft, it's craft with an environmental impact, right? So things like that, I think, there have been capacity building workshops that Accenture has organized. They have, connected us to partners. They have now also made us vendors in their procurement team. Therefore, there is also a lot of, orders from their side for gifting and for products that are made by all the artisans that we've trained, right? So it's been a wonderful partnership, yeah.
Oh, perfect. So I think, like you talked about the impact, like once you start doing something, the possibilities of, upskilling in terms of, hey, what else can be done, that keeps as the partnership continues. But at the same time, starting off the partnership is always the most challenging part, right? So would you like to walk us through, let's say the example of Accenture and help us understand, how was, before we even started, how was the engagement over there and what actually got the project kicked off?
Oh, I think with Accenture in particular, I think the fact that they were looking for something innovative, when it came to crafts. And I think that's where we fit the bill because they were already funding crafts. This was already an interest area for them, crafts and livelihoods. But I think we brought something innovative in terms of the recycling, upcycling focus, right? We also were committed to the particularly marginalized, like I said, for whom it's that much more challenging to provide skill training because they can't be mainstreamed in terms of employment, right? You have to then take that skill training to a level where you're setting up a new group enterprise, and then you're also taking that responsibility to bring, the orders, therefore, to complete that loop. So therefore, I think they liked the fact that we were innovative. We were, we committed to scale through the collaborative model. And yeah, we were working with marginalized. But having said that, there are definitely challenges. In fact, I listed down a few so that, sort of everybody who's listening in sort of keeps these in mind. Corporates are great. They really get that, the funding that they're providing can go a long way in the work that is being done by not-for-profits, by social enterprises. But I think somewhere there can be a lack of understanding of how complex social change really is. There are so many parameters around it. You can't just go and say, I will only work on livelihood. I will only work on health and sanitation. You don't work in silos. Things do get related. So therefore, year one sometimes goes in just like when you go to a new community, year one can just go in trust building, right? Then year two starts your foundation. Year three is then when you start showing some, impact. And then there is an inflection point, right? But donors need to understand that they need to be with you till that inflection point. It can't happen overnight. You don't put in funds and immediately reap benefits, right? So sometimes that can be a challenge, convincing all donors that this is why we need that long-term support. Don't just make it a one-off thing. The other challenge is, this is an age-old challenge. Very often the cost required for your personnel or your manpower that actually manages the project is the highest component of your program costs, right? And I think companies sometimes balk at this. And I would say not just companies, all donors, right? They're like, why are your personnel costs so high? But, that's how it is. I mean, at the end of the day, you need a team of people to be able to manage a program where everything is, also being done in a manual way. Very often here we're dealing with groups that are unschooled, unskilled. There's a lot of one-on-one interaction that has to happen. Like I said, there's trust building, there's a lot of training, capacity building, camaraderie that needs to happen. So therefore, one needs a larger team. And I think one has to be able to defend why you need, personnel or and you need expert resources. You can't just say anybody can do development work. The barriers of entry to the sector are lower, but there's also expertise that people have, and that needs to be valued. So sometimes we do have a challenge with funding for manpower. Thirdly, I would say related would be admin costs, overheads, things like that, and how do you find a place in the budget for that? That can be a challenge, right? Costs increase everywhere, but somehow an NGO is often construed as, being, somehow able to manage very little. So that's been a challenge. And the last I would say is, some corporates will only fund equipment. Some corporates will only fund training, right? In livelihoods, you need both. In order to train, you need equipment. You need space. So therefore, sometimes we've had that challenge where we've had to go out and have multiple donors for one project. So yeah, these are just some few things to watch out for.
So how big is the team in terms of just getting donors on board? I'm sure that from an execution perspective, there's going to be a large team already with managing so many partners. But let's say just managing of the donors, like you talked about the challenges that are there over here. What's the team that required to be able to effectively manage your donors itself?
So actually, donor management is honestly, a function of being very professional and being timely, right? So I would say that they don't, expect, weekly calls. They don't expect, sometimes they don't even expect monthly calls. There are quarterly updates for sure. And beyond that, there are agreed upon milestones, right? So donor management actually, as long as you are able to be, on time with all the reporting documentation, is actually not that challenging. The most challenging part is getting them on board, and then of course, making sure that this is a regular, sort of interaction. It's not that once you've signed, both parties have sort of gone, their own ways only to come back at the end of the agreement. So it doesn't take a lot of time, but I don't think one has to do it extremely professionally and with a lot of regularity. So there are actually only 2 of us in our organization who manage the donors, but we have a large team that actually manages the programs on the ground. That's where our time and effort actually goes.
Fair enough. So one, last question for myself before we go on to audience questions. Who are some of the best foundations in India that are very, keen on bringing innovative solutions to actually, make such an impact in the country?
I mean, there are so many, but I can name a few that where I know the founders personally, and therefore, I can sort of absolutely vouch for them. I have visited their project sites as well. So when it comes to employability, skill training, there's Head Held High Foundation. There's also Quest Alliance. When it comes to a lot of innovation in the sector, I would say Nudge Foundation. They've done some extremely good work. When it comes to crafts, there's Industry Foundation, there's Urmul, There is, of course, SEWA, Self-Employed Women's Association in Ahmedabad. So yeah, these are just some examples off the top of my head. Like I said, I have visited all of them, and therefore, they come to my mind first.
What about corporate partners?
Well, I mean, we've had extremely good equations with all of our donors. So we work with Accenture, we work with Deloitte, United Way Hyderabad. We work with social venture partners. They have been really amazing in terms of giving mentorship as well, along with funding. Then we are currently working with Yash Technologies. In the past, we worked with HPCL, we worked with Tata Trust. So, I mean, I'm just listing down everybody.
No, I think this is, just wanted to get a few names for, the attendees over here, as foundations, as incubators, as they also look at building their own, pool of partners that they could be potentially working with. I think this is a very good insight. And Yash Technology is, again, an Indore-based company where I'm from. So it's, more of my, hometown places. Glad to hear them as well over in this list. I think let's go to the, audience questions. We'll just give one question right now. So in terms of, corporations, how do corporations actually look at CSR funds? What are their, thought process around it? What are the expectations from their partners?
Right. So I have seen corporates really evolve, in their approach to CSR. I remember back in 2013-14 when, the New Companies Act came out and, this was a new guideline. There was a lot of, sort of thinking and saying, okay, maybe now let's do this in a, more structured way, right? Before that, I think CSR was something that was done seriously, but it was not always with, like a 5-year plan or a 10-year plan, right? Now, the difference I see is companies have structured teams. They themselves have, impact parameters that they want to achieve through their funding. They are very clear in terms of the areas that they will support, the kind of interventions that they will do, the kind of resources they can bring in addition to funding, right? In terms of additional support, things like that. So I just see that it has evolved so much. It's a lot more structured. Therefore, I mean, it's a good time, I would say, to do some, background research first before you approach a company, because they are inundated, right, with proposals all the time. Many of them now have also moved to a model where they do a yearly call for proposals, right, which is great. Because I think earlier, some of that was not as structured again, and one could miss that, Earlier, there was also, I think, a little more importance on referrals. So if you could, be referred and therefore get a foot in the door, it was easier. But now it's really become, extremely sort of well organized, at least at all the larger organizations, right? There are, of course, smaller companies who maybe have limited budgets and therefore they look for, maybe organizations that are, willing to do one-off projects, or maybe where the founder takes a personal interest and things like that. But most large organizations and companies that we've worked with, I've been extremely impressed with, the kind of long-term thought that has really gone to their CSR programs.
Well, I think that's very inspiring to hear. Just one quick question: any good platforms for foundations to understand or to know any open proposals that are there from corporates coming in? Anything you can recommend on how do we find that?
Yeah, there are a couple. I think Samhita, they usually have these opportunities. So if one can, look up Samhita's website, they have you can be registered and sort of listed on their website, and a lot of companies do approach them to help them with their CSR. There's also United Way Hyderabad, United Way Bangalore. There's Charities Aid Foundation in Delhi. So these are organizations that are sort of nodal partners. Many companies will often route their funding through CAF or United Way, rather than manage a lot of partners, NGO partners themselves, right? So get in touch with CAF, get in touch with, UW, like United Way. These are organizations that manage very large scale budgets. Give India, but of course, Give India is a lot more sort of philanthropy driven, not necessarily CSR.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, fair enough. I think this has been really, really helpful. And thank you so much, Mayura, for coming down over here. I think there's a lot of learning that, all the ecosystem partners in this call were able to take from this this session, and also, paving way for startups and innovation, right? As an important aspect for us to ensure that we are being able to bring the impact ventures across India, give them the platform. I think this session has been a really very meaningful and informational one to just understand the approach and the way. So thank you so much for coming down over here, and I would like to thank all the attendees who came down for this session as well. Really appreciate for you taking out the time. I'm sure that the conversation with Ms. Ghazal, Ms. Mayura, and Mr. Hari, all of that would have been really helpful for all of us to understand how does CSR Foundation, the CSR funds really work, and as ventures who are looking to create impact, how do we leverage their support in bringing such into market? So with that, thank you everyone for joining in for this session. I think we're on time. And thank you so much, Marina. We'll be in touch, and we'll keep looking to engage and support each other and collaborate in this space.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Wonderful questions. And I hope there was a lot of, I hope there was learning from what I said. I know there was from what the others spoke about. And yeah, looking forward to being in touch.
No, I think there's been certainly that. Right? So we'll ask just one last thing. Mr. Varun, also over here from AIC Raise. So we also, and all the attendees, we also wanted to get on our AIC Raise, one of our partners who have been very, who have been working on social impact ventures for the last few years, and have been very working closely with UNDP as well towards sustainable goals. They are also one of our partners on this program. Hey, Arun, are you here?
So, hi, I've been discussing, I've been listening to the entire discussion, and I was so happy with the information provided, and it was really enlightening. It was interesting. And one thing I'd like to say is CSR funding, how startups can make use of it, and how more impactful startups can come out of those CSR fund. The opportunities are immense, and I think this is I would say, most needed session. And this would really help. It would basically open a lot of eyes in terms of that, and more startups, specifically they get into the 17 SDG goals. They might get a lot more benefited out of the CSR funding idea, because not many startups knows about this. They don't even know how to get access to the CSR fundings, and this is the need of the hour. And the more sustainable startup comes into the ecosystem, then yes, the ecosystem gets stronger and the world gets better. So basically, we are practically saving the world with this session. So yeah, it was excellent. And thank you so much, Taha, for the beautiful moderation. And thank you all the participants for their insightful opinions and thoughts. So thank you so much, and cheers.
Yes, thanks, Arun, for the nice words. I think I totally agree with you. CSR funds are a great way to be enabling the societal impact, and actually, the focus towards saving world through the innovation and technology is, a paramount for us as well. So great to have all the attendees to the call. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming in. Thanks, Arun and Mayura as well over here, and look forward to catching up again soon. Take care, guys. Bye-bye.
Take care. Cheers.
Thank you, Taha. Thank you, everyone.